Beep beep, what's up ninjas, my name is Semworld, and today I am going to be teaching you guys the Valhalla Room Reverb. Now I understand a lot of people use this one already. They use the presets, they think it sounds totally fine, just mess with the, the mix, the dry and wet and the decay time, I understand. But today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to use the other features in it, just in case you ever find the need to do it, which is important. I'm going to use layman terms for this, but so let's get straight into it, guys. So in front of us we have the Valhalla Room, and I always tell people, if you want to know what an effect is doing, always put the mix at 100% and mess with the settings, because that's usually going to show you how it's affecting the sound. So the Valhalla Room is a nice reverb that was made, and it's $50 and it's easily torrentable. So the first settings that I think are the most important in the Valhalla Room are going to be your main ones here, which is your mix, your pre-delay, your decay, your high cut, and your depth. So I understand some people understand what these mean, but the depth is the one that's kind of a little bit tricky. Usually you think depth is going to stand for how intensive, how aggressive the effect is, but no, it stands for something else. So mix, very straightforward, 100% means your whole signal is covered in it, and the reverb, and at 0 nothing's happening, and at 50% half the signal is wet, half the signal is dry, which means half the signal has reverb and the other half doesn't have any reverb. Now the pre-delay is cool because it's gonna lag the reverb. What that means is that, let's say you have a sound or a drum that you want that transient to come through hard and then you want the reverb to kick in, then this is where you're gonna set that value in your pre-delay. You can see the reverb kind of lags there. So this is really useful for more, again, if you're doing like bass type of sounds or very transient type of sounds that you want that hit before the reverb kicks in, just so that you preserve the transient a little bit better. This is what you're going to do that. So that's what the use for this. It's very cool, and that's how I would use it. Now the decay time is pretty straightforward. I think everyone knows what this is. It's how long the reverb is going to stick around. Now in the Valhalla Room, we're going to have early and late, by the way, and the decay is generally going to be more towards the late style of reverb, which we'll get into in a bit. Now the high cut is just going to be a low pass, so you can high cut your reverb. Now, why would you want to use this? Well, the reason is sometimes you're going to have a lot of sounds in your mix, and sometimes you want that reverb, but let's say you have some hats, or let's say you have some leads with a lot of reverb, with a lot of high frequencies in it. Well, if you have a long decay time and you have the high cut all the way up, you're going to get this like ringing noise, and you don't want that. You want to kind of have a cleaner style of reverb. So that's why we have a high cut and not a low cut. You can always use an EQ, by the way, as well after a reverb in a return bus to kind of have a little bit more control over that. Now the depth is the thing that I think sets a lot of people off. Now the depth is going to be pretty much like a crossfader, like you're crossfading between early and late style reverb. So at 50%, you're going to have a little bit of early and late reverb going on. Early is just going to stand for the reflections. So when you clap your hands in the bathroom, you're going to hear those early reflections, and if you clap your hands in the tunnel, you're going to hear the reflections, but then you're going to hear that late reverb, which is that more of the body. You'll get into it right now. At 100%, you're getting only late reverb, and at 0%, you're only getting the early reverb. You're getting those reflection points more. Okay, so now we're gonna go into the early to talk about this. Now, this is what I don't like about the Valhalla. It's a little bit too free for my taste. I like plugins that just tell you mix, dry and wet, decay time, and then maybe, room size, and that's it. Because then you can sometimes get stuck in this world where you're trying to be like, no, it sounds better here. No, it sounds better. So I'm not a big fan of more choices, but again, some people are, and this is where you can get to do that. So early size is going to be the size of your reflections again. It's going to be more of those early hits. Think of this sort of like a decay time for those reflection points. Now, the early cross is something that I don't expect a lot of EDM producers to fuck with, because it really doesn't make that much of a difference, and it's a little bit hard to kind of grasp. But the easiest way for me to put it is, you guys know reverb is a stereo effect. So the early cross, all it's going to do is the early reflections, the early reverb, pretty much is going to, if you have that up to, let's say 1, it's going to allow the left and the right side of the channels, because again, we're in stereo, to transfer energy, aka transfer reflection points. So that's all it means. Now the next feature we have is the mod rate and the mod depth. Now they don't tell you, but pretty much the reverb's gonna have a chorus on it, and the higher the depth, the more you're gonna apply to it, and the higher the rate, the more that it's gonna get modulated. Think of it like an LFO. So this is going to be like a chorus effect added to it. The early send is going to say how much of it we're going to send to the late reverb. Now the diffusion is actually a really cool one. If you notice, what it does is it kind of makes the sound on the side seem a little bit foggy. So it's bright when it's at but then it's like it's not hitting as hard anymore. It's kind of like spread out. So like someone came with an eraser and erased it a bit. Now the reason for this, guys, is let's say you want a reverb that doesn't have that but more like a wah, then that's what you use. You add diffusion to it. That's why a lot of studios in the back, they're gonna have some diffusion panels, because when the sound hits the back of the wall, you don't want that sound hitting and coming straight at you. We use diffusers, which are gonna be pretty much, you know, like acoustic stuff that we have, where it's like not a plain acoustic foam, but it has like different, like this section might be this long, this section might be this little, and then this section might be weird. So the sound spreads out. It doesn't hit and reflect back. It's kind of spread out. That's the deal with diffusion, and you can use it in the studio and in reverbs as well. All right, guys, now the late section is going to be where a lot of the action is going to happen. This is my favorite section of this reverb because you can get really cool. What I like to do when I create atmospheres, or when I was making sounds for some of the romplers out there for cinematic stuff, you know, what I like to do is I like to apply 100% reverb and mess with the late in the Valhalla Room to get some really cool sounds to input in these romplers. So pretty much here, you know, what we're going to be doing here is very simple. Late size is going to control the size of the room. This is going to be the body of the reverb. How big do you want it to sound, like the body of it? Remember, when you clap in a cathode, you're going to hear the early reflection points, which is like, and then you're going to hear the late, which is the reverb, the body of the reverb. So the cross is going to be pretty much, you know, again, the same as early. At 0, we have left and right. They have their own channel. They're not intermingling. They're not in the center, you know, they're not transferring juices and, you know. And then when we have the cross at 1, we allow them to kind of spread, aka you have the right and the left going into each other, you know, they're kind of just spreading around. So pretty much that's what the late cross is going to be. Now the mod rate and the mod depth is going to be, again, another chorus effect that is going to be applied to your late reverb. And that's what this is going to be doing. The higher the mod rate, the more that the chorus is going to be like modulating that sound, the reverb, the late reverb. Now the bottom part is what confused me back in the day until I finally understood it and finally understood how to use it, okay? And this is where it gets a little bit where you guys are going to use it. And this is where it's very, you know, very, very useful. So bass X over, just think of it as a fader. How this is going to be the setting that cuts the mid frequency from the low frequency. So if I have, let's say 1050 hertz, anything below that is going to get affected by this bass molt. So if I have this at 540, anything below 540 will get affected by the bass molt. The high molt is going to get affected by whatever is above the high X over, aka the frequency. So if we have a high X over of, let's say, a 10,000, anything above that will get affected by the high molt. So we're pretty much, you know, going like this is going to be, this down is going to be my low, and this up is going to be my highs. You can do this in a lot of plugins, but this one is just a bit weird because you're so used to seeing it visually. So how do I use this? Why am I saying this is what you guys are going to use? Well, sometimes we want to add reverb to bass lines or to like a whole sound as a whole. So the problem with reverb is that if you have a bass sound, you know, you don't want the low end of it to get really big. You want the reverb to be more in the mid range of it. So let's say that we want anything below 860 to be multiplied by 0.50. What does this mean? Well, this is going to be in conjunction with your decay time here. Let's say our decay time is at 10 seconds and our bass mult says 0.50x. This means that only 5 the second decay time will be applied to the low frequencies. Anything below 860, then it's going to have a decay time of 5 seconds. Now, if we understand this, if we're at, let's say 2, that means that, you know, the low end, anything below 860 is going to have, you know, let's say 11 times 2, what is that? 22 seconds of decay time. And that's all this is saying, and that's it. Very simple, right? Now, high X over, same thing here. Now, these are very, very useful for advanced sound design. Like, let's say you're doing sound design for movies, sound design for video games, and you want to get certain effects. It's really cool because then what we can do is also modulate stuff in here with, like, you know, Ableton's automations. But generally, this is what the Valhalla Room is all about. The one other thing is going to be here, the reverb mode. You can change between rooms, and you're just changing the algorithm there. So do mess around with that. You know, a dark room is not going to have as high frequencies, and LV426 is going to be more of that vintage style of reverb. And then you're going to have other ones which are really cool. And you can play around with these once you find the settings, just see which one fits yours best. I am going to recommend that if you are going for that lo-fi hip-hop or very old school stuff, try the LV426. It sounds very nice and then very, very, very retro. Now, guys, the last thing I have to say is have fun with the reverb. You know, you can do cool tricks. Like one of the things I did for, you know, a couple of my friends that they were doing, like, you know, cinematic trailers, and they wanted a set of sounds was, for example, this sound. which kind of, you guys know, creates like really kind of effect there. Let's add a little bit more here, maybe late cross. And you can get really cool effects with that. Anyways, guys, have fun with this. Just, play around with it. Hopefully this helps you guys out a little bit. And if you guys have any questions about, the Valhalla Room, make sure to leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them to the best of my knowledge. Now, there have been a lot of haters recently on the channel because I've been uploading dark progressive house tutorials, and a lot of people think that means something else. So guys, come on. If I found a video and someone said, oh, it's on like Prida progressive house or progressive house, and it was like a techno more deep house tutorial, I don't find the need to leave a hate comment. Just saying. Anyways, then just take care and you guys have an amazing day.